symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling? And here to answer that question, of course, the master of ceremonies, Mr. Chris Hero. Chris, how are you, man?
I am stupendous. I don't know if I've saved wrestling yet. Do you think we have?
I think we're well on our way.
We're well on our way. How are you, Conrad?
Man, better than I deserve, happier than a puppy with two Peters, and excited to be here with you today. We're talking about a fun topic. I guess all of our topics have been fun so far. Episode 1 was just a bit of a catch up with you to see what you've been doing over the last year or so. And then last week we talked about the late, great Tracy Smothers. I got incredible feedback online from those two, Chris. How about you?
Yeah, it was touching, man. People were sending in videos and GIFs and stories, and just had a number of people reach out and text me that listened to it. And I just, I could have talked for another 2-3 hours about Tracy with various stories here and there. And, you know, he touched a lot of people, and I was just glad to have so much to say. You know, I like telling stories that people haven't heard. You know, everybody's heard a ton of Tracy stories, but I think we got a couple in there that were new, and just to pay honor, to pay some homage to a guy that was helpful to so many people for so many years.
Totally agree. If you haven't already, check it out. Of course, everything we do here is free on adfreeshows.com. You do not need a subscription. You do not need to come out of your wallet. So tell your friends about Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling. Today, though, our topic is all about returning to NXT in 2017. And this is going to be a fun topic. I think, Chris, you and I met for the second time right before you came back, right? Royal Rumble 2017?
Yeah, I would have. That would have been my first month back. Right outside of Wale Mania. Is that right?
No, we were actually backstage.
Oh, at the Rumble.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know why I just spaced on that. That was Orlando a couple months later. But yeah, we did meet backstage, and Charlotte introduced us.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A small world, man. Well, let's talk about your release back in 2013 before we jump back into the return. Meltzer wrote in the Observer at the time, Chris Spradlin, 33, who was Cassius Ohno in developmental and who has wrestled as Chris Hero for most of his career, was let go this past week. He had been pulled from television because they weren't happy with his physique and then was brought back. But since returning, had been mainly putting people over, although he did work a competitive long match with Luke Harper in the main event of the TV show that aired this week. Everyone knows he's a talented guy, but I sensed the way he was booked that they'd already made the decision that he wasn't getting on the main roster, and NXT is to prepare people for the main roster. The only thing I've heard negative on him was the physique, but everyone acknowledged his talent and passion for wrestling. He'd been training hard to change the physique, as was evidenced in his final TV appearance this past week against Luke Harper. He wasn't exactly looking like a bodybuilder, but you could see he's being more toned than he had been. You're not going to make gigantic changes in a short period of time at 33 without chemical aid, and the company rules don't allow for that. Apparently, the company felt there was something missing, but praised his talent and enthusiasm. Since they aren't going to bring him up, the decision was made to let him go. One of the coaches there had in the past week or two said from the all-around standpoint, he was the best guy developmental right now. He immediately got bookings on the indie scene, including going back to PWG and Pro Wrestling Syndicate as Chris Hero, and would be a good fit for ROH, which really needs a new top-level guy in their mix right now. And then he would run through what else you'd been booked on. But it's a pretty nice little write-up saying, hey, man, he's probably the best guy there, but he doesn't necessarily fit WWE's vision for what they're looking for. What can you tell us about this time?
I had just gotten to a point there where there wasn't really any turning back from the perception that they had on me. You know, sometimes you can leave some type of an impression, and then you can change people's minds over a short period of time. And I feel like maybe my last year in NXT 2012 to 2013, I just had rubbed some people the wrong way and had given the wrong impression. And then one little thing turns into a big thing. And I just, there wasn't much I could do. I had been called into the office one day. I don't really remember. I think it was actually a Friday now that I remember, because I had a show that night in Tampa. And they had given me a 30-day talk, and it was Bill DeMott. It was the building's general manager who they decided should be in on this crucial meeting. And then our strength coach was also in there. And I was just basically told, hey, look, we're going to give you like a 30-day evaluation period and, see whether we're going to move forward or move in different directions. And it's not a bad idea to give someone a heads up. And I know that they had done that. I think mine was the first case, but they did that with a couple other guys in NXT. Some got let go, some they kept. But in practice, it did not work because I wasn't booked on all the shows. I was getting left off of shows. So when you're not wrestling on shows, you don't have the opportunity to prove something to those that are judging you. But also there were just, wrestling is so subjective,
right?
That, who's to say you had a good match, right? I've seen people come back from stinkers and then get a round of applause. And I've seen people come back from just destroying it in a good way, like just killing it, and then just be given their lashes, like, what, you're killing the business, So just in that situation, it was a lose-lose situation for me. And gosh, I had gotten down to legitimately 199 pounds. And that's the lowest I've been in my adult life. And I was working super hard, and I had a good relationship with the guy, Ryan Ward, who was writing for NXT, and he would call me up and pitch ideas to me, and just, his hands were tied as far as what he could do, but he did give me an opportunity to have a banger of a match with Luke Harper. That was more of like a 75-25, the first one. And then he got it booked for the next set of tapings where it was more of a 50-50 match. And, I thought we had a hell of a match. And I was pulled into a room the next day after that match, and we sat and watched the film, and they were just incredulous of how I was standing toe to toe with a guy as big as Luke Harper. Which, if you watch the match, you could see that, he had some pounds on me, but, I'm his height, maybe just a tad shorter. And, I have some of the best strikes in pro wrestling, and just, they were not buying it. I think the quote I was told was, well, if Vince saw that, he'd have a stroke, which I thought was a really classy thing to say. But I couldn't do anything. I was booked in a match against Leo Kruger prior to his switching over to Adam Rose. And I was booked it was a live event in Daytona, and it was 5 minutes, curtain to curtain, 100% squash.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go out there and sell my ass off. I'm going to bump my ass off. And, I'm going to show them that this idea that they have of me, that I don't listen and just do what I want, is not true, because it wasn't true. I did have situations where maybe some matches went over on time. Some were my fault. Some were not my fault. I did have a certain way that I preferred to wrestle and would like to do. But when I was told, hey, don't do this, don't do that, I legitimately would cut those things out. But if somebody's looking for something bad, they can find something bad. So I came back from getting squashed in Daytona Beach in front of 150 people. I think the host of the show was Yoshitatsu, wearing a race car driver's outfit because we were in Daytona. It was just a very peculiar, surreal event. I came back and went right up to my coach and said, hey, what do you think? I didn't get to see it. I'll watch it later. So I knew I was fucked.
So listen, there's a lot to unpack on what you said, but let's go back to, I guess, walk it back, and we'll start at the end. Who was the coach you approached there? Was that Bill DeMott?
Bill DeMott, yes. He was the head coach at that time. story for another day, but Bill is a guy that I had become acquainted with when I was signing with WWE the very first time. I had met him, and he came down for some of the FCW TVs before he was the head coach, and I thought I had a good rapport with him. That quickly turned, and I just didn't figure it out until it was too late. So Bill is a guy that was not a fan of mine, and on more than one occasion would say one thing to my face and then say one thing to another person's face.
Which is par for course in wrestling. A lot of
it is, but it is shitty when the people who behave in that manner are in managerial positions, or people that hold, hold power, and then the lives of the people that are, working for them, they have control of that. So, I just had gotten in a little bit too deep, and there was really nothing I could do. I at least did have the 30 days to kind of wrap my head around it and figure out, like, what, this isn't so bad. There's a lot that I can do. There's a lot of places I can go, and I could take this thing that could be crushing. It could be disappointing, but man, I can turn this into, revitalizing my career and going back on the road. Man, I miss traveling so much. That was before NXT did any travel loops. So man, I am just stuck in Florida 24/7, which is great. But when you're used to Chicago and Los Angeles and Philly and going back home to Ohio to see friends and family, it gets to you. So I was very excited to get back at it.
So a lot to unpack still. Let's talk about, you said early on in that discussion, I rubbed someone the wrong way. That was Bill DeMott, right?
Yes, it was. And I think it wasn't just Bill. There were issues that I had. God, I say issues, and that makes it sound way more serious than it is, but just maybe disagreements and differences of opinion with a couple guys, Terry Taylor, Billy Gunn. Those are just the ones that come to mind. But, you just, does
that fundamentally come down to when a guy has success on the independents and has quite a run on the independents, he comes in with sort of his style and his idea of what his character is and his wrestling is. Whereas WWE sometimes would look at that and say, oh, this guy has a bunch of bad habits. He doesn't know the WWE way. And it's almost dismissive of, oh, that may have worked for the indies, but you're not a TV wrestler. You've got to learn the WWE way, whatever that may mean. That's often been the impression that we fans get, is that sometimes WWE looks down on guys who were indie darlings, whatever that may mean. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah. And that was very evident when I went there in 2012. Indie was like a bad word.
Yeah.
And it changed over time. NXT in 2014, 2015, things became more accepted and more revered. But
why do you think that is?
Because of the success of the guys like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens going in there and just tearing it up and being the most popular wrestlers there. Finn Balor coming in, and just Samoa Joe. Even they saw that, oh man, maybe these guys do have something and they can connect with our crowd. And they would often think that independent wrestling fans aren't necessarily their fans. And so when I started, Dr. Tom was the coach. And he also felt like, hey, we've got to get rid of some of these indie bad habits. And I can understand that point of view, but it just, I don't know. It's like I said, if you're looking for something, you can find it. There's certain things that the boss doesn't like, and you've got to figure out what those things are so that you don't do it. You get in the habit of not doing it so that you don't do it the one time the big boss sees you, because the big boss sees you, you get that one chance, and then you're forever the guy that did that thing that he doesn't like.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I feel like with Dr. Tom in particular, he has his finger on the pulse of what Vince likes for decades. So maybe it's something where he personally himself doesn't dislike what you did, and knows that it could or would work, but he also knows Vince ain't going to go for that.
Yeah. And that is how things absolutely used to be. They're still that way to an extent, but there's way more leeway now than there used to be. There'd be like, not that Vince is ever going to see a house show in Ocala for FCW or NXT, but they wanted you to not do these things in case, right?
But also too, some of that change is probably because once upon a time NXT was purely there to get guys ready for the main roster. Now NXT sort of is the main roster. They have their own show, and there's guys who wrestle on Wednesday who don't ever want to be on Monday or Friday. They'd like to do their whole career on Wednesday, but once upon a time, they weren't on TV, and that wasn't the plan, right?
Yeah, that was you were trying to get on Raw or SmackDown.
Right.
And now with NXT, you have a different big boss who has different tastes to Vince. So there are things that Vince likes that Hunter doesn't, and things that Hunter likes that Vince doesn't. And that can get very confusing. I think I mentioned that a couple episodes ago. So I wore it as a badge of honor. Like, man, I was independent.
Right.
I came from nothing. I figured things out and, built some popularity, built my skill. Gosh, if you look back through my career, I've got so many cool areas of my career, but it's like, I look back when I was 3-4 years in and I'm having matches with Punk and Colt Cabana, and we were popular with those crowds.
Yeah.
But being popular with those crowds isn't being popular in Philadelphia.
That's right.
It's not being popular at big shows in Chicago. It's not being popular when you go over to Europe. You have to learn these different crowds and you have to figure things out. And that is the benefit that independent wrestlers have going to an NXT or a WWE, because it's not just knowing the different things to do. It's having the confidence in yourself that you're going to figure it out.
Right.
I used to talk with Sami Zayn about this all the time. It's like, we were always exceptions to the rule. So why would we stop becoming exceptions to the rule? It's like, we've always come from something and people thought something of us, but we were able to maneuver through that to get to a certain point, regardless of any situation we were in. So that is just, you have that confidence so that when someone is hammering you, you're not like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. I thought I had it figured out, but I don't. It's like, oh, okay, here's some new elements being introduced, and how can I fend this off and then figure this out to get where I need to be? It's like judo. You take the thing and you maneuver it this way and you flip it over that way, and you try not to get taken down yourself.
Talk to me about the 30-day thing. I'm fascinated by that process. Hey, we're putting you on notice. You got 30 days to turn it around. Do they tell you what they need to see from you in the next 30 days? More of this, less of that? Or are you just walking out of there like, well, I guess I should start lining up indie bookings. I got 30 days of paychecks coming.
Again, wrestling is subjective, right? So I was not given anything tangible. The thing that I was given tangible prior was, hey man, we'd like to see you get rid of some love handles. We'd like to see this, that. I switched very briefly on house shows to long tights and a singlet top, similar like Bret Hart style.
Like Corbin started with. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had that for a little while. It was okay. I didn't love it, but in the meantime, like I said, I got myself into the best shape I'd ever been in. So, and I ended up getting some new gear. So I just switched back to my gear when I thought the time was right.
Let me ask about that. Does NXT, we've learned a little bit about how the system is, but do they come to you and say, hey, here's what we'd like to see you wear gear wise, or is that totally up to the guys?
Usually up to the guys, but there are creative pitches and situations where, hey, have you ever thought about this? Da, 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 da. I had a conversation with DeMott about, getting in better shape. And I asked, hey, what do you think about changing up my gear? Or maybe I'll get some kind of a singlet or something. And he's like, yeah, that's great. That's great. Cool. So he was on board with it. So I just went ahead and figured it out. Surratt, Sasha Banks' husband, I went over to his place and made some sketches, and he made something cool for me. And I wore it for a little while until I got myself in what I thought was the best shape I could get in. Then I had some like Orlando Magic style gear for my guy in Japan. And that's what I believe I was wearing in the Luke Harper match, at least one of them. But like I said, 30-day talk, I wasn't given, hey, we want to see X. It was just, you need to show us that you can be coachable, that you will listen, that you'll, etc. And I thought, I thought that, there's no way I can win Bill over. I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best for 30 days. I'll try it. And I even had my last Full Sail, the last TV tapings we had, when I didn't know for sure I was getting let go, but I was 99% sure because of the way that I was booked. I did 3 matches. I wrestled Tyler Breeze and I beat him in a beat the clock match. And then I got attacked by Rusev and I lost in a quick rematch to Tyler Breeze, and then I wrestled Rusev at the end of the night and he left me laying. So I thought, like, man, if they're writing me out, that seems like what they would do. I waited till the end of the taping to talk with Hunter just so I could get a couple minutes with him and chat with him. And I saw him wave Bill DeMott over. So I could not have a one-on-one with Hunter at that time. And then I'm just like, oh, great. I can't. There's nothing I can do here. So the 30 days came up on a Monday and I ended up getting let go the Friday prior. So it was like 28 days, guys. What the hell?
So listen, I know we're having a little fun with this, but I am curious, when you were talking about the conversation you had at a prior time, hey, we want you to get rid of the love handles or whatever. They want you to get in better shape. We fans, we've seen the crazy facility they have. And you've mentioned that there was a strength coach. Is there someone there who's going to help you dial in diet and your exercise routine? And do they make that person meet with you, or is it sort of on your own to seek them out? What does that look like?
So at that time, they didn't deal a lot with dieting stuff. They did have a strength coach that they had just hired and had moved to Orlando. So you could get with this guy and do workouts. You could do extra workouts, whatever. And you
Cena's buddy?
No, this Cena's buddy had gotten fired.
Okay.
Because he had spoken up about some things and it did not go over very well. That's when we were still in Tampa. Rob McIntyre, he runs Hard Knocks Gym, which you see all the guys working out there. You like Big E, obviously Cena. He's got the garage door that's got everybody's name on it that achieved a certain feat of strength. I forget the exact number, but it was lifting a certain amount of pounds. Just some legendary stud athletes that came through developmental, got their name on that wall. He was awesome. He was super helpful. It was in Land O'Lakes though. So it was always like a 45-minute drive to get to his gym and then 45 minutes back. And then you got to go to practice. You got to whatever. So it was not the most convenient, but he was fantastic. The next guy that came in, rubbed people the wrong way right away, just with a couple weird incidents. But, if you asked for some help, he'd be very helpful. And I didn't have any issues with him. But years later, they would work more with having people meet with you about diet or whatever they would want you to work on.
You said in an interview right after your release that you left on good terms. And I guess that's evidenced by the fact that you do eventually return. But did you feel any legitimate frustration over being so close to the main roster and never getting the opportunity like so many guys that you came up with, whether it was Cesaro or Seth Rollins or Daniel Bryan?
I didn't have any frustration about not making it to the main roster. What I did have frustration with, though, is looking back and reflecting on how we were treated at certain times and accepting it at the time and thinking it's totally normal at the time. And then when you look back and you go, oh my God, we were treated like children. Just, these are guys that would go on to be $1 million athletes, right?
Right.
And you're being scolded like children. That doesn't build a strong confidence and mentality that you need in your future $1 million athletes, right?
Yeah.
There's just a couple situations. I don't have any off the top of my head, but there's just moments that you would think like, man, that was weird. We thought that was normal. That's not normal. And
right.
Having that era where there were many good things, but there were just some moments that were just the shits. Having that frame of reference really gave a context to me for how things were when I was this second time around, because there were times that were hard in the last few years as well. But in the back of my head, I'd always be like, you guys don't know how easy you have it. You don't know what's on the other side. So again, you become more accepting of things because you've seen it way worse or you've had it way worse.
Let's talk a little bit about when you're prepping for your return. You're working as a major part of Evolve during 2016, and that's the year where Evolve and WWE start to get close. Were you let in on how close the two companies were at the time Gabe was running the joint, or was it obvious to you what was going on?
Gabe had made mention to me that he had been working on a relationship with Hunter and with NXT. And I think it was the way it was explained to me originally was they had some guys in NXT that they wanted to get outside experience, whether it was like an American Alpha or like Enzo and Big Cass or whatever. They just would want to send them to smaller crowds with Evolve, different crowds, and see if they could figure out how to put things together in front of a different crowd. That didn't really end up happening. That happened many years later with like the Street Profits and Fabian, I believe, was Evolve champion, Fabian Eichner. But because of that, I was aware that there was something going on. And what's funny is when they started to explain on the internet, like, man, it looks like Evolve's going to be a developmental to NXT. There was a report that's like, well, we expect Chris Hero to finish up with Evolve now because of his previous relationship with NXT. Like Gabe was going to fire me or something. It's just a funny little report that was going around for a while, which was not the case. And wrestling on these Evolve shows, I was able to see William Regal again. I had lost contact with him, and all these months later, that's what ended up leading to my return to NXT.
Real quick, I want to talk about Cody Rhodes for a moment. You wrestled him when he left WWE and returned to the Indies, or I guess not returned, made his indie debut. Did you have any inclination of what Cody was trying to accomplish at the time? I mean, he really started to build a name for himself when he just posted that picture of here's all the opponents I would like to wrestle just on paper there.
Yeah, the famous list.
Yeah,
that was copied by many people. I knew he was determined, and I knew he was not going to accept anything less than success pretty much wherever he went. I knew Cody from my previous tenure. He had come down to FCW, and I had like a 3-way match with him and Seth Rollins in Fort Pierce. And, you know, I think we exchanged numbers or had emails or something. So we corresponded a couple different times. There were a couple times I had like a pitch or something, and I sent it to him to get his opinion on. And Dusty was so good to me. Dusty was always good to me, no matter what, from my first day to my last day. So I remember when Cody was going to hit the Indies, I'm sure I messaged him pretty quickly and said, "Hey man, anything you need help with or any questions you have, just let me know." And sure enough, I ended up wrestling him in his second match on the Indies. He wrestled Zack Sabre Jr. I wrestled him the next night in Brooklyn, which was SummerSlam weekend.
That's right.
And we had just a decent match, but there's a couple funny moments in this. One is we're brawling around the arena, and for some reason, I haven't watched it, so I don't remember the context. We're brawling outside, and I stand up on like the snack bar to jump off and give him a double axe handle, right? And I forgot how tall I was. So I'm standing on the snack bar, and as I stand up, I rock the shit out of my head right on that thing. And it's like a cartoon. It's like bonk, and I'm like, oh God, I go down, and I've got a clip of it somewhere, but it's just the most asinine guy just, messes himself up for no reason. And then later on, I am not really a heel in this match. I'm kind of, depending on what my opponent is, that's what I kind of did at the time. I would take the heel role in matches, or I would sell depending on who I was in there with. So with Cody, I start to put some aggressive heat on him, and there is a guy in the crowd that has a dusty fathead, like one of those that you would hold up. You'd either stick it on your wall, or you would hold it up to distract someone that's trying to shoot a free throw.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I'm going to grab that fathead. So I go over to get it, because I think the guy's maybe heckling me, and then I kind of get in his face a little bit, and then I take his gimmick, and the guy's like, "Oh, please no," whatever. But Cody comes out to start attack me. I cut him back off. I go back in the ring, and I give him like a double axe handle, like with the fathead, which may have been in poor taste in that moment. However, very shortly thereafter, he made his comeback on me. He retrieved the Dusty Rhodes fathead from me and then proceeded to kick my ass. So that's just a funny moment from that match. I did wrestle Cody again on a show in Texas for a group called VIP. And then I wrestled him in a tag at La Boom in Queens. It was myself, and I think it was myself and Drew McIntyre against him and Johnny Gargano. So I got to wrestle him maybe 3 of his first 10 matches on the Indies.
Wow. Your last major indie show is PWG's Battle of Los Angeles 2016. It starts with you facing off against Jushin Liger, and you actually get the victory. What was it like to work with Liger, and how big of a win was that for you? I mean, for those of you who maybe are new to the indie wrestling scene, BOLA, as it's called, the Battle of Los Angeles, is sort of, I don't know, indie WrestleMania, maybe?
Just, an exceptional collection of talent from all over the world. That tournament, especially, I had injured my knee. I'm going to guess about a month prior. I don't know if that's exactly right. Actually went into that Cody match with my knee being all banged up, and I had to take some weeks off. So I was stressed out that my knee was not going to hang in there for the match. But just, win, lose, or draw, just standing in the ring when Jushin Thunder Liger makes his entrance.
Unbelievable.
Surreal. It is absolutely surreal. He was the consummate professional. He super kind. I had met him, you know, a handful of times prior, whether it was in the States or in Japan, and just a funny guy. He's, you know, he's not standoffish. Just an incredible work ethic. I mean, all you have to do is look at his body of work and the things that he had overcome in his career. Just, you know, one of the absolute greatest of all time. It's just a very, very cool moment for me to be able to have a match with him. Those weekends are long and there's a lot of matches.
Right.
So, you know, it's a tournament and everybody wants to have the best match they can have. So everybody's like, yeah, let's do this and do this. And you know, like for hours. That's kind of how BOLA was, you know, guys everywhere putting stuff together for their matches. You look over, Jushin Thunder Liger's cat napping, just sitting there in the Legion Hall in Reseda. Just a very cool thing. One strange thing, maybe I only think this is funny, but you're putting the match together and you go, okay, I'm going to do this, whatever, blah, 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 right? I go out there, and as I'm wrestling Jushin Thunder Liger, I'm like, holy shit, he's got horns. So whenever you grab a guy if you're going to put him in a cravat, if you're going to suplex him, I did not account for his horns. Right. It's just like an extra level of difficulty if I'm going to give him a pile driver, I got to get his horns between my legs. It's just a funny thing that I had not thought of before.
It's funny that you say that because I had thought of that before, specifically with him and Psychosis. Like, that's got to make things a little different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You also, I mean, these masks are expensive, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be an asshole and rip Liger's horn off.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's several $100s, so let's not tear it up.
Yeah. And it's just a little disrespectful too.
Oh yeah. Here's a legend and I just ripped his mask. Hey, the cravat looked cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think William Regal was at that show for BOLA. Is this when the conversation starts, or had it already happened at Evolve?
No, I believe there was a show in March of that year where I had seen William Regal, and then we started to chat. Just an interesting dynamic between he and I, because he's a guy that was very supportive of me. My first tenure, I met him right outside of Atlanta, Georgia in 2002, when myself, Punk, and Ace Steel, a guy named Derek St. Holmes, we made the trip all the way down to Atlanta to train with Dave Taylor. We spent a week there, and Fit Finley came in a couple days. William Regal came in a couple days. That was the first time I met him. I wouldn't see him again for 8 years. I think I met him again in 2010. And that was when the wheels started to get in motion to get signed in late 2011, start 2012. And during my duration at NXT that first time, I was having certain issues and this and that. Like I said, I just couldn't get out from under, regardless of what I tried or what. But the last thing I'm going to do is send him a message or send him an email and complain. I just never connected with him on that because I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want to complain. And I personally felt that when I got let go, that he was disappointed or let down or whatever, because he never reached out to me. He never said, hey man, good luck or whatever. And I just thought, well, that's just kind of how it goes. I can talk about this at a later date, but having been fired twice, you have a bit of a reflection on people that you expect to reach out,
right?
That don't, and the people that you don't expect to reach out that do. It's just an interesting dynamic there. There's people that you get messages from that you would have never expected, and then people that you have spent most of your life with for the last few years that you just never hear from again. And everybody has their own thing, but it's 2021, right? It takes 5 seconds to go, hey dude, you okay? Cool. You know, you don't have to have an hour-long phone conversation, but I think some people don't realize the effect that has on others.
Right.
Anyway, so I had gotten let go. I thought he was pissed. I thought whatever. The very next interaction I had with him was me tweeting that I was going to do an IWA Mid-South show. And then he tweets right back and says, is he going to have Dave Taylor's money? Which is like, oh my God, that's like from Ted Petty Invitational 2008, where, you know, some people didn't get paid for the show, whatever. And it's like, oh my God, am I supposed to go get this money for him? Like, what? It's such an awkward thing. And I'm like, oh man, he really is not happy with me. So that would have been 2013. I think around March of 2016 was when I bumped into him again. I hadn't seen him or spoken to him at all. And he just starts chatting with me like, you know, like everything's fine. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Yeah. I've seen some of your matches and this and that, you know, like no time had elapsed at all. And I was like, oh man, I guess he's not mad at me, or I guess he's not disappointed or whatever. And that night I had wrestled Matt Riddle for the very first time when he was still super green. He had super short hair. He wasn't used to calling a good amount of stuff in matches yet, so he was still brand new. And I would go on to have several matches with Riddle through Evolve. But that conversation with Regal put us back in contact. And then he would check in with me. And, you know, much later in the year, he had, you know, said, hey, you know, what do you think about coming back? What do you, you know, is that something you're interested in? Whatever. And then I still lived in Orlando. And NXT is in Orlando, and they were taping at Full Sail, which was 5 minutes of a drive from the place I was living at the time. And I just got a message one Wednesday. I'm going to guess this was November of 2016. And he just goes, hey, do you want to come meet with Hunter today? So I'm like, sure. Okay. Like, you know, what time? He's like, yeah, just come right now. Okay. So I'm like, okay. So I'm like, shit, do I have to dress up? Like, what? God, I haven't had that kind of stress in a while where you're like, oh my God, I got to look nice, you know? Right. So, you know, I put on like a little sport jacket and, you know, some nice pants and whatever. And then I go over to Full Sail and I'm just like, I don't want anybody to see me.
Right.
This is not a sure thing. This is just coming to say hi. So I just kind of go there and just wait in the same spot. And I'm waiting. You know, I see a couple of people, and every time I see someone, I'm like, oh my God, you know, everybody's got a big mouth. Everybody's going to talk, whatever. So then finally Hunter's got some time. I go over, I talk with him. He asks if I'm interested. And, you know, I'm like, yeah, sure. You know, what do you have in mind? This, that, and the other. And didn't give me too many details, but I was like, oh man, I guess this might be a possibility. So I went home.
Let me come out right there. What was your aspiration at that moment? Like when you said, yes, you were interested, you had tried this before. It didn't exactly go as planned. You've sort of, relit yourself as Chris Hero on the internet and on the independents. And now there's an opportunity to at least have a conversation and you're interested. In that moment, what was your aspiration in the wrestling business with WWE?
Well, I just thought it was a different landscape. You've got like Shinsuke Nakamura there. You've got Samoa Joe. Kenta's there. You've got the Revival doing their thing. Eric Young, Bobby Roode. And I just thought like, man, I was having some hellacious matches all over with opponents from, you know, different shapes, sizes, and locations in the world. And I thought, you know what, this, you know, maybe I can come back this time and just really knock it out of the park. And I thought that, you know, it just seems natural. It seems like this is the progression of where things are going right now. And I remember having a conversation with William Regal, and he just kept saying, like, listen, you can be yourself. You're going to be yourself. This is, don't worry about anything else, da, 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 whatever. So I was under the impression that I would be Chris Hero because that was what was intimated to me, right? That like, oh, okay, well, they had Kevin Owens after me, so they're not going to want another KO, right? It's just a chance for a rebirth. Let's capitalize on this momentum that I've been building. Let's just really do something. I've a lot of these people on the roster I've had matches with before, and we can play off of that. Like it can just be something fresh. That's what I was thinking.
What was your, maybe I wasn't asking right, so I'm going to try a different way, but what was your goal? Like, everybody's in wrestling for different reasons. Some people just enjoy the idea of having matches with a new crop of opponents, and other people really aspire to be a top guy, whatever that may mean. Some people want to be world champion. Some people want to see the world. Some people want to be a TV star. Some people just want to make a bunch of money. When you go back and you have that conversation and Hunter says, would you be interested? When you're saying yes, you're hoping that gets you to one of those things I just listed. Which one appealed to you the most?
Well, I certainly wanted the security of a weekly paycheck.
Sure.
Like I said, I had hurt my knee a couple months prior, and that worried me. It wasn't serious, but it was difficult to work through. And then I'm like, oh my God, what if, how many shows am I going to have to take off? Like, how serious is this, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So that was definitely number one. And then I just thought, man, this is this is not the same place I left. It's revamped. It's new. I can go there and have some awesome matches and just build into the next stage of my career. Whether that would be killing it in NXT or killing it in NXT and using that as a springboard to hop onto the main roster and then have matches with guys again that I know very well, that I've worked very well with, or some people that I've never had the opportunity to cross paths with. I thought that this was just an untapped market for me. And I thought, like I said, I've been the exception to the rule. So I think this is a situation where I can come in and just nail it where I was not nailing it 5 years prior.
So you're doing very well on your farewell tour heading back. Here's some highlights. Tracy Smothers defeats you to retain his IWA Mid-South heavyweight title. It's your last match in IWA Mid-South, which is a promotion that was obviously synonymous with you in your early career. And we know how much Tracy meant to you. How special was that match for you?
That was awesome. Tracy had apparently been asking Ian for the opportunity to have another match with me at some point, and just the stars aligned. And I wrestled him on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's always been a classic night for pro wrestling. And Rachel had come with me to that show, and she knew who Tracy was. She was familiar with some of his body of work, and she knew of my reverence for him. But Rachel had never seen a Tracy Smothers promo. So I am there. He's he's like the IWA champion at the time. And the feuding company was D1W, and with black electrical tape, he had put D1W on top of the IWA belt. And he just proceeded to have his 15-minute Tracy Smothers promo, just with any ridiculous catchphrase he had, and then several personal insults for people in the crowd. And there's this one moment that just broke me, right? So he's got this log with him, right? It's not even, I guess you could use it as a walking stick, but it's a little short for that. He's just got this thick log with him, and he's got the ring. He's talking his stuff, and I just, I roll over and I grab his stick. I grab his weapon, and he looks at me, he goes, "Hey man, give me that back. The Klan gave me that." And I'm like, wait, what and it did not register in my head what he had said and what I'm just like, what is this? Is this a fever dream that I'm having right now? What's going on? Until much later, I had seen a shoot interview that he had done. And sure enough, I think it was an RF video shoot from, a couple of years ago. And just at the end, he pulls out this stick and then he tells the story of how I think maybe he was getting ready to go down to Mid-South or something. And some guy is, hey, man, you need some protection. Hear this, and it was some guy that was apparently in the Klan. So this weird wooden stick that he had, just one of those weird, peculiar stories that you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Did he just make that up right now? Or is it something that really has a story?
Yeah, it sounded made up.
Yeah. But it was awesome to get to have another match with Tracy, and just I watched it back in the last few months, and he's beat me around the building, and just his mannerisms and just the little things he says. It's just very entertaining to go back and watch, and it was cool to have that moment with him. And he was just the last time I would spend any significant time with him.
On your farewell tour, you also wrestled, as Bruce likes to refer to him, Dick to Go at Evolve. How was Dick Togo to work with?
He's exceptional. He is an incredible performer in the ring. My first introduction to him was him in Kaientai in late 90s WWF. But I would later go back and watch his Michinoku Pro work, his Universal work before that. And then I followed his career from then on. And he is just, man, he's like one of those rubber balls that you get out of the quarter machine, right?
Yeah.
You just like, boom, it just bounces all across the room and flies around. His cardio is incredible. He's in great shape. He used to be heavier, which, made his flying impressive. The most impressive senton bomb I've ever seen. He also, from the apron, would do this handstand slingshot senton that's just almost impossible to do. And then on top of that, he's just such a gentleman. What a great guy. I first wrestled him in West Virginia, of all places. Madman Pondo was running a company called IWA East Coast that ran out of South Charleston, West Virginia. And Pondo knew how much I thought of his body of work, and just surprised me one time. It was like, hey, man, you're going to defend the belt against Dick Togo in a ladder match. It sounds like a fake thing. A ladder match with Dick Togo in West Virginia doesn't seem real. But it is real, and you can. There's like a music video on YouTube you can look up, or I think Smart Mark Video or High Spots would have the actual footage. And man, just what a badass he is. He's awesome. So I got to go back and have another match with him at La Boom in Queens, and he's just he's awesome, man. He's I'm happy to see that he's got a gig with New Japan right now. But I would like to see him wrestle more because I just have always enjoyed watching him. If you're out there listening and you're not super familiar with Dick Togo, look up his stuff, because he's very, I don't want to say underrated, but I will say unheralded, because a lot of his best matches I don't think people are super familiar with. Those Michinoku Pro multi-man matches especially are absolutely. You watch the ECW one from Barely Legal and you're like, oh my God, that was incredible. But they have matches that are twice as long, twice as fast, with different members. I see those matches. I've seen them all, but I see something new every time I watch them. Incredible wrestler, Dick Togo.
Another guy you wrestle on your farewell tour, John Silver. You put him over for Beyond Wrestling. Of course, most people know him from the Dark Order now with AEW. How far has he come since you worked with him then, and what you see from him these days on AEW?
Yeah, John was always good. He was always very solid. Him and Reynolds both. But with those BTE skits they were doing with Brody, it just really unlocked that personality. Okay. And I just think it's not that he developed personality all of a sudden. I think he just felt like, oh, I can do this. And, this isn't on the show, so I can just joke around and have fun. And then they're like, hey, why aren't you doing this on TV? He's just like, I didn't know I could. Like, I just thought this was being silly, but he really has captured something special. And it's one of the many disappointments of performing in this day and age where live crowds are sparse. You don't get to feel that organic groundswell of support of just a new face. You know, you've seen it for years where somebody does something on Raw and then next Raw they come out, it's like a whole new person with a whole new reaction. Just give you goosebumps, that kind of thing. And he's a guy that would benefit greatly by, you know, being in front of a packed house right now, but he's always been good. It's just cool to see him unlock something different.
Let's talk about your last PWG match. I think you were teaming with JT Dunn there. You wrestled Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly. How important was finishing up in PWG for you? I think some of our listeners who maybe are just familiar with your NXT and WWE stuff might not know how special PWG was for a lot of folks.
It was a little bittersweet because I got to have that match. I got to have one more match and teaming with JT Dunn, my partner in Death by Elbow. Just he and I have had some awesome matches together. He's just been the perfect tag partner for me. Just to see him grow and mature as a guy and as a professional, it's just, you know, been awesome to see. And he's somebody we'll talk about a lot on other shows coming up. But the difficulty here is, I believe I went for medicals on November 30th, but I didn't get word that things were a go until late December. So late December with a January 4th start, right? So everything is uncertain. I don't have to go into this at length right now. I can explain it later, but when I signed with WWE for the first time, there was something in my physical that prevented me from starting September 2011. I had to figure out what the hell that was. I had to figure it out on my own, which was the shits. But I have an elevated TE ratio, naturally elevated TE ratio. I'll have it for the rest of my life. It's just something that happens sometime. And the type of testing that WWE does measures the level, but it doesn't measure the content. That's a separate test that you have to find out to see whether your testosterone is, internal or external, right? If it's coming from a different source, that's a much more expensive test. It's a more rare test. I had to find this out and figure this out on my own with the help of some doctors. So that's why I was able to eventually start in February of 2012. But when I took my second physical, then they told me that I failed again, which I'm like, of course, dumbass. Like, I told you this. This is the whole situation. That's why I went and got this test on my own. Super frustrating situation. So I had to, my first 14 days in developmental in Tampa, I had to meet this guy at 6 a.m. and piss test so that they could establish a median for what my TE ratio would be. So it's just a stupid hassle, which is even worse because I'm not the body guy, right? And that's something I've dealt with my whole career. So I'm failing a physical, right? So I'm getting ready to take these new physicals. And in the back of my head, I'm like, it's just something's going to come up. It's not going to work out, or I'm just going to have to explain this. Even though I told them and talked about it, just, when there is something like that, you're not sure until you're sure. So I did not tell anybody I was signing. I didn't talk with anybody. The promoters I was working with, I just, stopped taking dates and told them that I would know in the future. There were a very, very small circle of people that knew what was going on. It may not even be a circle. It may be like a triangle. So when it was reported, I'll set the table. I was working a double shot for Evolve and Beyond Wrestling. I believe Beyond was in the afternoon and Evolve was in the evening. In between shows, I'm sitting at my merch table as fans are filtering back in, and they're going, "Hey, I just saw in the Observer that you're signing with WWE." Oh. So I'm like, son of a bitch. I was furious with Dave. I think the world of Dave Meltzer. I appreciate him. I think he has all the knowledge in the world, and I love learning from him.
Yep.
But at that moment, I was absolutely furious. And I was texting him with no response. And I'm just, in my head, I'm like, you know me. You have my number. Why wouldn't you ask me if this is true?
Right.
Why would you just put it out? There was some situation. It's been so long that I don't remember it 100% clearly, but he was having trouble. His mother was sick. His mother, who has just recently passed away, unfortunately, she'd had a stroke. And then shortly after that, his dad fell ill. So during all this, he was dealing with that, and he had his phone shut off for hours. So then I spoke to him later on that night. He said he had heard about it. They ran with it. Someone else, whoever, he's got a ton of people working for his site and his newsletter. So somebody put it up, and then he just thought, well, I just thought it was confirmed, so I put it out. And I was very upset because it wasn't for sure. I hadn't gotten the, yes, we're good to go. And I didn't want people to be disappointed, right? I didn't want people to think like, oh, he's coming back and cool. And then, or for me to get the call like, hey, something came up on your physical. We're not going to be able to start you. And then for the next 6 months of my career, I have to answer to everybody and go, well, I don't know what happened. And it's just put me in an uncomfortable position. So I was very upset with that. I cooled off, whatever. I eventually got the message that I was good to go. And at that point, I'd had, I think maybe, how many shows left did I have? Did I have 2 shows left?
Your last Beyond match is with Keith Lee.
Yep.
And I think your final was Pentagon Jr.
Yeah. So I got to have 2 farewell matches where I knew that I was going. So when I had that PWG match, I didn't know if I would be back or not. So it's not recorded or anything, but I did make a little speech to everybody just saying, listen, I don't know what's happening, but if I don't come back, thank you all for everything, et cetera, et cetera. So I have the Beyond match with Keith. First time I had worked with him. And then I have the Pentagon match. Oh, say that again. You're asking about Keith?
Yeah. Tell me about Keith. Obviously a lot of people are seeing him for the first time on WWE TV.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a lot of buzz for years before he was on the main roster. What was your impression of working with Keith?
I thought Keith was a great live event performer. And what I mean by that is I think he is more special when you can see him up close and you can see his size. You can see the agility that he has. You can see he was, working in front of 200, 300, 400 people, and he's flipping out of the ring onto people. And that just, seeing it on television is cool, but seeing it live is just a completely different thing. So I was happy to be able to work with Keith a couple times before his career really blew up.
You have your last match on the Indies with Pentagon Jr. Once upon a time, people talked about him as if he was the best wrestler in the world. The world has obviously changed since then. I don't think he's any different of a wrestler. These days, most everybody knows him as part of the Lucha Bros over on AEW. He and his brother Phoenix have absolutely torn it up and made a name for themselves here in America. I know they had a hell of a run in Impact, and Pentagon was even the champ there, but being on TNT every week has certainly gotten a lot more eyeballs on their work. But you wrestled your last match against him. Was that by design, or how did that come to be? And what do you remember about working with him?
So it wasn't by design. It was just kind of how the cards fell. It was my second singles match with Penta. And he's just electric, man. He has a certain kind of charisma that's really hard to explain. You could see him on Lucha Underground and kind of tell like there was something special about him, but working with him one-on-one in front of 500-ish people and just feeling that energy is just very, very cool. However, this match was not wonderful. And the reason this match was not wonderful is because in our very first spot, the top rope snapped. I had again, I think I'm clever. I'm never as clever as I actually think I am. His thing was Cero Miedo, right? No fear.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought Hero Miedo, right? So I had an artist friend of mine, Dave, mock up half my face, half Pentagon's face, and write Hero Miedo, just as like a little thing. And we had our first match at Logan for AAW, and it was awesome. Just great crowd. This was Hero Miedo 2. So again, half of my face is painted. I'm just trying to do this cool, different thing. And we got some good stuff planned, and then boom, the rope snaps, I almost go flying out of the ring. So we turned this into a around the building brawl where we may not be able to give them everything that we had hoped to give them in the ring from a performance standpoint there, but by getting closer to them and just really laying into each other, it gives them a better live experience. It doesn't benefit people watching at home as much because it's kind of hard to keep track of what's going on when you're brawling in the crowd and you're watching from home. But we just try to make up for what we couldn't do by just giving them a little something extra and close. We eventually work our way back to the ring. We do a little bit of stuff, but it was not the match that we had both hoped for. A funny thing about this, I'm used to the rope snapping in matches because it's happened to me probably a dozen times. This was I don't know if eyelet is the right word, but the area where the turnbuckle hooks onto the post, that snapped off. The top metal hook that is welded to the steel pole snapped off.
Wow.
So
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm on the mic and I'm like, well, that does a world of good for my self-confidence that I not only snapped the rope, I broke the steel off of the ring post. It was cool to have that match, but obviously I would love to have another one.
A do-over.
Hero Miedo 3, where the ropes do not snap. We make sure that they're extra reinforced.
Let's talk about the Observer. December 19th, 2016. It's written, Chris Hero may be returning. It's not a done deal, but he's already gotten to the point. He's gone through the medicals. It's notable because in the past, WWE would rarely bring back people they had cut, but the company is heavily scouting the indie scene and is getting the most aggressive it has ever been and trying to land the top in-ring wrestlers. Hero has been one of the best in-ring performers in the world over the past year and is Mr. Versatility in the sense that he can work seemingly every style at the highest level and is kind of a master at working a match where everything means something. He was with the company from 2011 to 2013 in developmental. He had mixed reviews in the sense that everyone respected his knowledge and ability, but there were issues with his body. He did end up losing a lot of weight when he was there. Now, here's the line that I know we're going to have to discuss eventually, so might as well now. When CM Punk came up with the idea of the Shield, who were at first going to be his henchmen and keeping the title for a long period of time as a heel, the group was supposed to be Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and Chris Hero, but WWE wanted Reigns in the group because they believed he could be the next face of the company, and that was the right way to feature him and have him learn working in matches with top guys. So let's just time out right there. This Shield rumor has existed for a long, long time. Did you ever have an inclination that this was actually supposed to happen?
0% of an inclination.
Okay.
I found out when everybody else found out by listening to CM Punk on The Art of Wrestling.
Okay.
And the thing that annoy is not the right word, but something that just makes me roll my eyes is just, I get tweets all the time about, oh man, Hero or Ohno was supposed to be in the Shield, when that's not true, because the Shield as a concept was not created yet. It was giving Punk a faction of guys, henchmen right there, a faction of guys that would have his back. I think he was going into a program with the Big Show or something at that time.
Ryback.
Yeah, there we go. Ryback.
Yeah.
And so technically I was never supposed to be in the Shield. I was supposed to be in a trio with two guys from the Shield. So I understand where it comes from, but it's just a little off. But no, I was not having any conversations with Punk about anything like that. Again, like I said, the difficulties I was having, I didn't really want to bug anybody or complain or whatever. I remember I didn't tell Punk I got fired. I think they were on a tour of Europe and he sent me like a Vox or something. And he's like, did you get fired? Like, what the hell happened? So I didn't even tell him I had like a 30-day thing or not. Like, our communication at that time it wasn't non-existent, but it wasn't like, I'm going to bug the guy. I'm not going to bug the guy. You know what I mean? Like, if there's something funny that comes up or whatever, I would think and send him a message, but I'm not going to like, hey,
pour your heart out.
Yeah. This week in NXT, we did that. Like, he doesn't give a shit.
No, he's all over. He's busy.
Yeah. So this is, something that he pitched and it got shot down and, Roman got put in there. And this was, I had no clue that any of this was going on.
Meltzer would finish the write-up here saying, since returning to the Indies, he's had a multitude of great matches to where, as far as in-ring consistency went, he was easily one of the top few wrestlers in the world. There was no word on a start date or role. The story was huge on the internet when it was broken, and on our website, it was one of the most 10 read stories of the year. So you got a lot of attention to come back in here. Listen, I'm the business guy. I love breaking this down. When you first have your conversation with Hunter, and then you actually sign paperwork, how long in between?
Little over a month, maybe a bit longer, because I think I went up to Full Sail in November, and then I am going into the PC for orientation on January 4th. So it was all very quick.
Talk to me a little bit about what was discussed as far as your contract, sticking points. I don't want you to give me dollar amounts, but I'm just saying, are you saying, we've always heard that, it's this many dates for this amount of money, or what was the plan? What was discussed back and forth during that 30 days in regards to your contract?
Weekly guarantee.
Okay.
There's stuff in contracts about royalties and this and that. And if you break it down, if you do TV, you get a bonus here. If you do some European tour, you get a bonus here, etc. But all that I really cared about was the weekly guarantee. Again, not to give actual numbers, but I was pretty happy that I was coming in and making twice as much as I made the first contract.
Oh, there you go. Good for you.
So again, like I said, I liked it. It's a balance, right? You have freedom and security. That's what you're kind of balancing back and forth. And I was giving up my freedom to, if I didn't want to work, I wouldn't take a booking. Right. If I wanted to spend an extra week in Los Angeles, I could do that. If I wanted to go to Europe and England or whatever, I could talk to a couple different promoters. I could set something up. And then also, we're so fortunate when we get to travel. We get to go to perform, which is incredible, but we can also bookend trips with, I want to see this thing, or I want to hang out with this person I haven't seen. So those are the luxuries of, calling your own shots. Yeah. But you're also you're not guaranteed a weekly paycheck.
So right? when you tweaked your knee, you're nervous. Hey man,
am
I going to put food on the table here?
Yeah, I worked through it a couple shows. That Cody Rhodes match was one of them. And then I was exhausted after that trip and I had to cancel my shows that following weekend, especially because I knew BOLA was coming up and I'm not going to miss wrestling Liger. We can get to this another time, but I did tweak my knee the next night in a tag match with Penta and Phoenix. So, it wasn't just one injury. It was something that I'm like, oh my God, am I okay? And I was okay, but it gets worrisome sometimes. So you're balancing security for your freedom. And I thought, well, you know what? I already live in Orlando. I don't have to move anywhere. I have no problem going to the PC because shit, I love wrestling, man. I want to get better at it. I want to learn more about it. I want to be around people that love it. I get to work out at the performance center. Like it, to me, it just made sense.
There's a lot to talk about upon your actual NXT return, and I want to do some of that maybe next time or another time. I am curious though, when you walk back in the building, you're back in the performance center, and Bill DeMott's not there. What else has changed since you were here last? Your first day back. What do you notice as being different besides, hey, where's Bill?
I think there were a couple extra rings. They had the PC set up to have mock live events that the guys and girls could get reps having matches in front of a simulated live crowd, but could also tarp it off so that it could be recorded and sent up to Connecticut for someone to review. Or, I mean, as you would see as time would go on, that's where they did like halftime heat.
Yeah.
And then that's where WrestleMania was. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this building that started out as a warehouse with a couple rings in it became state-of-the-art facility. So there were upgrades in technology, upgrades in equipment. There was all kinds of stuff in the gym. The medical center had, beefed up. There's more tables. There's, it's just bigger and more equipment. And then just, not a lot of familiar faces as far as people that were there when I was there before. I think Angelo Dawkins, at that time, Sawyer Fulton, Wesley Blake, Scott Dawson, Dillinger. Those were practically the only guys that were still left from when I got let go in late 2013. So a whole lot of new faces, a couple new coaches, etc.
Let's talk about the difference in the coaches because, whether intentionally or unintentionally, we've sort of thrown Mr. DeMott under the bus today. Yeah. Were there any coaches that you were excited to see there that you hadn't seen before, or any familiar faces that you're like, oh, I'm glad they're still there. I really liked working with them.
I don't think there are many people in the business that are as good of a human and as good of a pro wrestling mind than Norman Smiley.
I knew you were going to say Norman when you started that sentence.
Black Magic, Black Fujiwara, Big Wiggle. Norman is he is wonderful. And it's funny. God, we can do a whole show on him someday because I love his career. It's so fascinating to me, all the different things he's done. And he is he's just a sweetheart. He's a great guy. Something I really enjoyed was extra time with Norman, because when his class is done, he sticks out in the ring. He stays there. He works around. Man, he will work with anybody. He has spent time just doing his best to teach some of the worst pro wrestlers I've ever seen. And he loves it. He's so selfless. You can always learn something with him. You can always smile. I cannot put him over enough. Another person that we could do a show on someday is the master of 1,000 holds, Johnny Saint, the Houdini of the mat, my British wrestling idol. He came over to the United States just as I was starting back with NXT. So I got to spend 6 months being around Johnny Saint, and just one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen, and just also a real gentleman. He was somebody that I was really thrilled to spend more time with, and I got to spend even more time with him later on when I headed over to NXT UK. Let's see, Scotty Too Hotty had started. He's a guy that was always friendly to me, was very helpful. Steve Carino had not started at the PC. I think he came as a guest coach around that time, but later on in that year, he would become a full-time coach. And Carino is a guy I've known since I was wrestling maybe 2 years. He's somebody I've spent a lot of time with, and just somebody I think the world of. He's a fellow wrestling nerd. So if I think of something wrestling related or some obscure name, I can look across the building and I could see maybe 50 people that won't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I can guarantee you, I can say, "Hey, Steve," et cetera, et cetera. You remember when Bob Roop did the sugar hold and whatever, and Carino will know what I'm talking about.
He's one of the few people in wrestling I haven't met, but I'm such a huge Carino fan. I think he's a guy who was born 15 years too early. Timing's everything in wrestling. But man, if he comes around 10 or 15 years later, dude, he'd have been on top of the world.
Yeah. And just an inspiration to me. When I first started wrestling, I was more in ring and I just was not good on the mic because I never practiced and never just, I'm like, I'm not going to worry about that. But when I decided to start cutting promos, his ECW promos were an inspiration to me. And I'm like, oh man, I can use kind of that cadence, that inflection, that same kind of content. And then I got to work with him a bunch. And I always enjoy when I can spend any time talking with Steve. I was eager to build my relationship back with Terry Taylor. Like I said, Terry and I over the years have butted heads on some things, but that is bound to happen in pro wrestling. Terry is the person that walked me out of the PC when I got fired the first time. And he was so Terry may not always love my matches, but whenever he needs a wrestling idea, he would go, Hey, what do you think about this? Do you have this? Because he knows all the stuff that I have jammed in up here. So I would often shadow his class for a moment to help him think of something or whatever, which is funny because then at the same time, he'd see a match of mine and think it would suck, right? Terry walked me out of the PC when I got fired, and he's just like, listen, he's like, you'll be back here coaching. Like, just don't do anything. Don't say anything dumb. Like, just, you don't want to burn a bridge where you can, blah, 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 blah. That was in 2013. And, he just always makes jokes to me about taking his job as a coach. But Terry is somebody that I was eager to spend some more time around and just try to win him over. Because like I said, there's things that I do that he likes and there's things that I would do that he didn't like. And then I had never really met Matt Bloom. I met him in passing, but never had any kind of conversation with him. And God, he, really revitalized his career working in Japan, place I love dearly. So I thought, man, I can get to know Matt and, I'm sure we know a lot of the same people. I was just really going into it with an open mind and just to make the most out of everything.
Let's finish with a banger of a story. You've told me this before off air, but I want to go ahead and talk about the first time you returned to NXT TV, because this is quite the story, is it not?
Oh, okay. So couple parts here. The first part is my first week back at NXT is just packed. Wednesday, I have orientation all day long, and it's myself, the people from the new class, including 7 Chinese recruits that spoke very little English at the time. It's all the guys from 205. And we're just there all day getting the whole spiel. This is like a 9 to 5 thing, maybe even longer. The next day is TV taping at Full Sail, right? The day after that is a show in Largo, and the day after that is a show in Ocala. So I've got like 4 full days. I'm waking up at 7 something a.m. and I'm not getting to bed till like 2, which, okay, it's whatever. It's just a hell of a way to be welcomed back. So I'm there at Full Sail and I'm just watching because it's my first day back. Okay. And then as the show's getting ready to wrap up, I get pulled aside and they're like, hey, we think we're going to do a dark thing with you and Shinsuke. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. Just tell me what to do or tell me what you want. And this is all happening in, I would say, less than 10 minutes of time. It's like, all right, cool. All right, we got to get a Tron for you, this, that, and the other. and I'm talking with someone that is not Hunter, someone that's not Regal, and they're like, yeah, you're going to be Cassius. And I was like, are you sure? They're like, yeah, I think you're going to be Cassius. And I'm like, all right, well, let's find out. And we end up going over to Hunter, and he's like, yeah, you're Cassius. So this whole time I'm thinking I'm coming back as Chris Hero. And then it's like, okay, I guess I'm not. I had that wrong. There was some miscommunication here, but whatever. I'm going to go into it with an open mind and open heart. And so I just, Shin has his match. I don't even remember what it was, but he's the NXT champion at that time. My old NXT music hits, which is like the this rock song that I never connected with, but whatever. That's what they had for me at the time. I go out, I walk up to Shin, there's like good reaction from the crowd. It's not anything crazy, but it's a nice reaction. And I look at him and I tap the belt that's on his shoulder. And then that was that, right? It was just a dark segment. I don't know if it was simply to get it out that I was there to get some buzz, which I'm, pretty sure that that's the main reason. I don't know if it was to plant the seed for, am I going to wrestle Shinsuke? Am I going to whatever? I'm going to go into this thing with him and Bobby Roode, whatever. But it was not mentioned to me earlier in the day. It was mentioned to me. And then 5 minutes later, I'm in the ring with Shin. And then the next day I am wrestling in Largo in my Chris Hero gear because I didn't have time to get anything made. I did the less than 24 hours before I thought I was going to be Chris Hero. So I've got Chris Hero gear. And I wrestled Andrade in a fun little match in Largo. I wrestled Angelo Dawkins in Ocala in Chris Hero gear because you can't get gear made in 24 hours. So it was just a very, people are confused. I'm confused. It's just a hell of a way to introduce me. And it, like I said, it was a dark segment. It wasn't live, but it just, I don't want to say started me off on the wrong foot, but it was just kind of rushed and kind of like, oh, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing. And I, embraced it and tried to run with it.
What a story. We're going to tell the whole story about your time at NXT, but I wanted to sort of bridge the gap between what changed the first time you were there and your return. Any final thoughts on today's episode before we wrap things up? Because I know you've got some words of wisdom we want to drop, and we've got a little music we want to introduce the world to. But anything else we want to mention about your NXT return here?
Man, I just appreciate the platform to get to talk about this stuff. And it's been an interesting couple of years. And I am very positive minded. There's things that I wish could have gone differently, but didn't. There's things that I'm very happy happened, very pleased with. No, I have no legitimate regrets with anything. And I just appreciate all the energy that everyone's giving me with this podcast. It's cool to get to connect with everybody and talk a little shit and have some fun. So yeah, man, I'm excited because we've just got so many more stories we can tell. And so many other people I can put over that, people aren't super familiar with. I like being able to do that. So I'm actually I'm going to do my little words of wisdom here, man. I've gotten some good feedback. I've gotten some good DMs from people that have found these things helpful, whether they're in wrestling or on their way in wrestling. How do I start this? The message that I want to convey is that we as performers, we as members of the professional wrestling industry, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And what I mean by that is we can get away with a lot. And especially when you're popular, when you're very over with the crowd, when you're tenured, you can get away with half-assing this or taking a little shortcut here. But man, that's just not the way to go. Hold yourself to a higher standard, right? Just because you see somebody else doing something half-assed and they are super popular, super over, super successful, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your best to make the most out of whatever it is. And this could be something as simple as how you swing a clothesline that you know somebody's going to duck, right? It could be something as simple as that. It could be something as simple as locking up with full intent to lock up and not going on to the next thing with a half-ass lockup. Or it can be something like how you conduct yourself in a public forum, how you behave around fans, how you interact with one another. If you have an issue with somebody, it is super satisfying to just hit that tweet and just burn them with something right there. It's easy and it's gratifying, but man, just if it's someone you actually care about, hit them up privately, talk it out, and you'll just both be better for it. Just because you can get away with something like, let's use Ric Flair as an example, right? Okay. You watch Ric Flair's matches with Steamboat, with Terry Funk, with Lex Luger, with Sting, with whatever, right? He takes a lot of shortcuts in his matches. You know, there's a lot of low blows. There's a lot of repeating the same spots over and over, right? But that worked for him. That was his deal. That's what people wanted, right? Just because he can get away with those things doesn't mean that we can and should do those same things. Like, man, just execute everything with full intent. Have urgency with what you're doing. Like, don't think 3 steps ahead. Think about what you're doing in that moment and just be fully present, right? Does that make sense, Conrad?
Absolutely. Totally.
All right. And I am going to go back to a little musical recommendation to set this show off, and Stan's going to pop it up on the screen. There is a rapper from South Philly named Beanie Siegel. He was very popular in the late 90s, the 2000s. He was a Rockefeller rapper with Jay-Z. And he has this song called The Truth that is an anthem. This song is so fire. The beat was done by Kanye West, right? And Homicide of the independent wrestling world used to come out to this song. And oh my God, if you ever got to see Homicide come out to this song live on a show, it was just an experience. That presence that he had, the aura, and just the beat of the song. Like, man, I think if you like hip hop, you will love this song. And you probably, if you already know it, you already love it. But I would like to introduce this song to a world of people that are unfamiliar. The Truth by Beanie Siegel.
Let's do it. I love this one. It's an oldie but a goodie. We'll see you next week right here on Can Chris Hero Save Wrestling? I like putting a question mark at the end. See you next week, guys.
See ya.